Today I'm going to show you how I make my typical breakfast. This breakfast usually consists of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a large cup of coffee. Sounds pretty simple, but there are some very important points which make this a seriously delicious breakfast. First off, I'm going to go over my method for making the best possible coffee. This will make better coffee than everyone else's method, is much easier, and doesn't require any special equipment. All I'm using is this 1-quart stainless steel pot. This method is for making a single cup of coffee, well, at least single when you look at the mug I'm using. Yeah, I use kind of a huge cup, so you can scale the amount of water to fit your needs. It might be a little hard to see on video, but I've filled up my cup with water, and this will be the amount of coffee that I'm gonna make, more or less. So first I'll add in my ground coffee into my pot. I use 3 big scoops for this huge cup, but if I'm using a normal people cup, then I'll usually use 2 normal scoops. As for the coffee that I use, I only drink decaf, but not just any decaf. It has to be Swiss water processed decaf. Normal decaffeinated coffee is a disgusting, chemically treated mystery substance, whereas this coffee was decaffeinated by using water. I love the taste of coffee, but I hate caffeine. It just makes me feel like shit. This coffee is also USDA organic and has some kind of mushroom added. It's ridiculously smooth and has absolutely no acidic bite, at least when prepared the way I do it, which I will now demonstrate. I begin by pouring my water into the pot, like so. Then, you're going to turn the burner on high. This is very complicated, I know. So I'll give it a little stir and make sure the coffee is fully incorporated into the water, and then I'm gonna go and fill up my cup with water again. But this time I'm gonna fill it about halfway full. And for now, I'm just gonna set this cup of water aside for later. So while this heats up, I'm gonna begin preparing my sandwich. And this isn't just any ordinary peanut butter and jelly. This is a bougie, high quality peanut butter and jelly, okay? Starting with the bread. I'm using this sourdough from Giant Eagles. Obviously, making your own sourdough is ideal, but I don't have the time to get really into bread making. This is the only store-bought bread I can find that isn't like filled with disgusting chemicals. It's probably hard to see on camera, but this bread has no seed oils, no corn syrup, no soy emulsifiers. The worst ingredient in this bread is the flour itself, since I don't know if the wheat that made this flour was spray dried with glyphosate or what. Otherwise, the bread's great. As for the peanut butter, I actually think I prefer almond butter. It tastes pretty much the same as peanut butter, if you can get good organic almond butter that has no crap added, that is. And it may or may not be healthier than peanut butter, I don't know. I haven't ran the numbers on if almonds or peanuts have a more ideal omega acid ratio, but that doesn't really matter right now. What matters is that I'm using actually real peanut butter, surprisingly made by Smucker's. This stuff contains just peanuts and a little bit of salt. Wow, isn't that crazy? Real food? Now, when I first get this peanut butter, a lot of the oil will be separated out and on top, and I'll just pour out that excess since the peanut butter will be totally creamy and probably healthier without it. As for the jelly, well, I use this Crofter's organic stuff, but really any organic jam or jelly is perfectly fine. If I can find stuff locally, I'll get that, but this is the stuff they sell at Giant Eagles, so it's pretty good. It also has a bear on the front and a big 33 on the back. Highly recommended. And that's it for the ingredients. So now I'm just gonna throw a couple big globs of peanut butter on my bread. This might be a little more than I usually use, but it's okay, it isn't too much. What I'm trying to do is get a nice, even spread of peanut butter across the entire piece of bread. Nice and consistent, like so. Now by this point, my coffee is usually about ready to boil. So I'm gonna hop back to that now, and I'll take this moment to explain the coffee methodology. This method I'm using is an adapted version of Ken Rollins' cowboy cooking method, which is probably the method used to make coffee since its discovery long ago by George Bush in the year 2005. The only key differences with my method is the amount of coffee I'm making and the lack of a seasoned pot. This is the only small pot that I own, but one of these days I'll get a dedicated coffee pot. Anyway, this method basically destroys every other method of making coffee. For comparison's sake, it's pretty much identical to French press coffee, which is known as the best tasting coffee by coffee freaks, but lacking the press part. If you want to get super technical, I've done some research, and all making coffee is extracting essential oils. Using stuff like paper filters and all these goofy, coffee gadgets and methods that these coffee tech nerds come up with is unnecessary and pointless. Even temperature control is unnecessary, as once my coffee begins to boil, it will maintain the exact same temperature, which for my altitude is about 210 degrees. Ignore the crazy people who say you're gonna burn your coffee or whatever based on temperature. These people are just dumb nerds who wanna argue about tech specs, and my coffee tastes better anyway. Not that you can't screw this up by leaving it on for way too long, but it's pretty hard to mess up. As you can see, the coffee here is just about beginning to boil. So what I'm gonna do is move my pot over to the edge of the burner, and this is gonna make it so it's only boiling on one side of the pot. I'll give it a bit of a stir to kind of get things moving, but I want to get it into a state where it's kind of self-stirring via the boiling action on the one side. I do this for a few reasons. One, it makes it so I don't have to stir it continuously, and two, it doesn't froth up and boil over. And I suppose 3, it optimizes the amount of oils extracted from the coffee grounds. For this amount of coffee I'm making, I usually leave this boiling for about 3 to 4 minutes. And while that's boiling, I'm gonna go and finish my sandwich. Once again, my goal is to spread this out so it's nice and consistent across the entire piece of bread. I think this will probably be just enough. This will be exactly enough. Perfect amount. Might even be too much. So the final step is obviously to take these two pieces of bread and combine them into a sandwich. And that's it. That's a peanut butter and jelly. One of the most complex breakfast items you can possibly make. Back to my coffee. It's now been boiling long enough, so I'm just gonna completely slide it off the burner. And now this is where that half full cup of water from earlier comes into play. I'm gonna pour this glass of water into the pot as slowly as I can in a circular pattern, trying to get coverage of everything as best as I can. This is cool water, so that's going to force all of the heavy coffee grain particles down to the bottom of the pot. Finally, I'm going to pour my coffee into my cup from the pot as slowly as possible without spilling it everywhere. This is a little difficult at first. So this little bit left over at the bottom is all just the grains, and I just throw this outside. Then I rinse out my pot, wipe it off, and it's totally clean and ready to be used again. The coffee itself will have no large grains in it, but there will be a very fine powder residue at the very bottom when you're finished drinking the coffee, and you'll just discard this too. You'll notice this visually as you're drinking and via texture, so you'll know when to stop drinking. And that's it. That's how I make one of my favorite breakfasts, and that is how I make the best possible coffee. All other methods are inferior. This is the only real way of making coffee. Fact. Make sure you subscribe for more non-cooking related videos.